Assalamu alaikum students. Today we will discuss respiration in man. Today we will discuss structure of respiratory system and in next lecture we will discuss function of respiratory system. Let's start structure of respiratory system. In man respiratory system include two things. The first is air passages and the next thing is lungs. Lungs and air passages both form respiratory system in man. Air passageways, the first component or first part of respiratory system of man is air passageways. Air passageway consists of nostrils. Here you can see nostril. This is nostril, opening of nose. That is called nostril. Air enter through nostrils and nasal cavity. And large dust particles are trapped by the hair and mucus in the nostrils. Air while passing through the nasal cavity become moist and warm and filtered of smaller foreign particles by mucus. The next is nasal cavity. The next part of air passageway is nasal cavity. Here you can see nasal cavity. The internal structure of nose is called nasal cavity. Here you can see in detail the structure of nasal cavity. Nasal cavity is aligned with mucous membrane. Inside of nasal cavity, mucous membrane is present of ciliated epithelium and it is made up of epithelium and it has tiny hair-like structure that is called cilia. Each nasal cavity is subdivided into three passageways by the projection of bones from the wall of the internal nose. Our nasal cavity, the internal surface of nose, contain three bones. By three bones, three passageways are formed. We have discussed nostrils, nasal cavities. Now the next part of air passageway is pharynx. Here you can see pharynx. This is pharynx. Here you can see again pharynx, a tube-like structure arises from nasal cavity. The nasal cavity lead into the throat or pharynx by two internal openings. The pharynx is a muscular passage lined with mucous membrane. The next portion is larynx. Here you can see larynx. This is larynx. The air is channelized from the pharynx into the larynx. The larynx or voice box, the other name for larynx is voice box, is a complex cartilaginous structure surrounding the upper end of the trachea. There are some additional points to understand. Epiglottis, one of the cartilage, the epiglottis, have a muscular controlled hinge-like action and serve as a lid which automatically cover the opening of the larynx during the act of swallowing so as to prevent the entry of food or liquid into the larynx. The larynx, the opening of larynx is called glottis and it has a lid-like, a cap-like structure while we eating or drinking any or taking any food. The epiglottis close our respiratory system or the upper portion of larynx so that any portion can't enter our respiratory system, any portion of food. Here you can see glottis. The upper portion of larynx is called glottis. The opening of larynx is called glottis and also lined with mucous membrane. In the glottis, the mucous membrane is stretched across into two thin edged fibrous band called vocal cords. Inside our larynx, vocal cords are present, which help in voice production when vibrated by air. We have discussed nostrils, nasal cavities. Air enter from nostrils, then pass from nasal cavity, then pharynx, then larynx, and the next portion to larynx is called trachea. Now we will discuss about trachea. Here you can see a tube is present. That tube or that structure or that pipe is called trachea. The trachea or windpipe is a tubular structure lying ventral to the esophagus. Esophagus is part of digestive system and extend to the chest cavity or throat, thorax, where it is divided into right and left bronchi. When trachea divide, then we call it bronchi. In the wall of trachea, there are a series of C-shaped cartilage ring which prevent the trachea from collapsing and keep the passage of air open. Each bronchus on entering the lungs divide and subdivide progressively. Trachea, bronchi. Here you can see trachea. When trachea divide, then it is called bronchi. And when bronchi divide, then it is called bronchioles. Divide mean it convert into many thin branches or tubules. These are bronchioles. Very thin tubules are called bronchioles. Smaller and smaller bronchi. When the smaller bronchi attain a diameter of 1 millimeter or less, then they are called bronchioles. When bronchi trachea divide into bronchi and bronchi are divided. When they attain a diameter of 1 millimeter or less, then they are called bronchioles. This is also a short question. Bronchi have the same cartilage ring as the trachea, but the rings are progressively replaced by irregular distributed cartilage plate and the bronchioles totally lay cartilage. This is a MCQs. Bronchioles totally lay cartilage. Trachea have cartilaginous ring and bronchi has cartilaginous ring but bronchioles totally lay cartilage. Bronchioles are made up of many circular smooth muscles. Air enter from nostrils, then nasal cavity, then pharynx, then larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, and at the end alveolar ducts or alveoli. Here you can see alveoli. These grape-like structure are called air sac, and each component of air sac is called alveoli. It has blood capillaries, and here exchange of gas take place. The bronchioles continue to divide and subdivide deep into the lungs and finally open into a large number of air sacs. Air sac is the functional unit of lungs. This is a short question. Each air sac consists of several microscopic single layered structure called alveoli. Overlying the alveoli, there is a rich network of blood capillaries to produce an excellent site for the exchange of gases. Now the air passageways has been completed. The next part of or next structure of respiratory system is lungs. The lungs are closed sacs that are connected to the outside by way of the trachea and the nostrils or mouth. Lungs are spongy because of the presence of millions of alveoli. Lungs are placed in the chest cavity. Chest cavity is bounded by ribs and muscles on the side. The floor of the chest called diaphragm. Diaphragm is a sheet of skeletal muscle. Lungs are covered with double layered thin membrane sac called pleura. With that, we have completed our topic of structure of respiratory system in man. Thank you for watching.